So, good evening, everyone. We are back on with Michelle X for a new interview about understanding of the mind. We did our first interview actually back in July, and I thought it would be interesting and beneficial for a lot of us out there to do a follow-up on what we previously just touched on. And Michelle, if you allow me, I'll introduce your background. So you are a level 3 personal trainer, sports massage therapist, nutrition consultant, and sports injury and rehabilitation specialist. You have over 20 years of experience in empowering individuals to achieve optimal fitness, health, and performance, as well as to overcome stress and recover from injury and illnesses. And your expertise includes human physiology, exercise physiology, biomechanics, holistic nutrition, and mind-body well-being. Is there anything that you would like to add to what I just said?
Well, what another fantastic introduction you give me there. I'm just really happy to be back. This is one of the subjects that I feel so deeply about, and I have much gratitude for the awareness that has come through observation over the time that I've been practicing this. And I feel like this is one of the areas that is kind of hidden with the physical aspect that we spoke of on our last chat. It was very much the physical aspect of change, like the diet and the exercise. And that's very tangible to many beings. It's you can see it, you can experience that physically, you can taste it. There's a lot of things that are physically associated to that part of the holistic package that we're trying to achieve here. And this tackling the mind is a very hidden aspect of the holistic health or well-being. So this is really interesting because when we talk of experiences, it all happens within the environment of our own internal being. So we have to then try and unpick these things without a tangible um, being in front of us. So it's mainly like hidden and in silence of our own internal environment. So what I want to ask today of anyone is that if you do take any notes or any journals, really try and relate things and tools that we give today or we offer to some of your own experiences. So when we speak of certain areas and we bring up certain questions, try and relate that back to how you kind of experience your journey and your everyday things that you may struggle with or that the triggers that come up for you, because that then makes it unique to your experience. And then it's very much an easier concept to grasp because a lot of beings, you look at others and you see their experience and you think, oh, it's more like a belief rather than a knowing. So when we can relate it to our own experiences, this is when we can truly know if it's right for us or not. And I just want to mention before I start that this is just me sharing my experience. Um, and it is by no means medical. I'm not a medical professional, and this is not medical advice. This is just purely based on my experiences and what I have to offer in regards to my journey and what I've experienced along the way. So, if you do make any changes or want any extra help, I do um, kind of say to look into any medical professional help if you need that. There are a lot of intricate things that happen in the mind, and I know that medical professionals can offer that advice if you need it. And also, I am here for help and advice. But what I would say, if you're suffering with any mental health issues, that it is important to seek the help that you need and that works for your journey because many beings are. scared to open up about this subject. So whatever works for you and is best for you, then you need to experience that on your journey.
Well, thank you very much for all this precious advice. And I'm very glad to have you back and great advice for somebody because I remember last time we did talk a lot about food and what is the most nutritious for our body, the most optimal food that we can have. But we also, or you really pointed out that it's a very individual journey. So it's a really good advice to somebody listening to just take some notes as they hear things that they relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we touched on maintaining a state of alignment and balance, as well as our thought and how they play a significant part in our health and well-being. And this is what we're going to expand on today. Chatting with you before this interview, you had said that macronutrients is a good entry point in this subject. Can you, from the start, explain what is the role of macronutrients and their relationship to our topic today?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of these questions will be interlinked with each other because it all ultimately is down to the balance of the being and the body and all of the systems that are in all of the systems that are kind of encased within that holistic practice. So when we look at macronutrients or macros, as this word is quite heavily used in the fitness industry, check your macros and what's your macros. And so what we're talking about is kind of the larger amounts of nutrients in our diet, which are the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates.
Mhm.
Now, having a balanced diet is optimum for health in the body. And what we don't want to suffer with is deficiencies. So, if, for instance, we remove one part of that in the aspect of food and nutrition, then ultimately we kind of end up with we need to replace that with something that's usually a supplement of some kind.
Mhm.
And like we spoke of about before, it was mainly to do with how that's processed within the body and are we getting optimal amount of nutrition that our body needs to thrive. A lot of the diets we spoke of last time as well were removing certain things out of our diet. And that's why blood work is super important for that, because when we've got the balance there in that area, that's when we can thrive um, physically. And that kind of sets up the level so that we can then work on our mental and emotional state. So this is kind of the base level, that the entry level, really, to set up our holistic practice. So that enables the metabolic rate also to kind of come to a balance. And then we look at kind of anabolic and catabolic um, parts of our system that is building up and breaking down. And optimum is that balance again. And that's what we're looking for, is that bringing that system into balance. So, what does our body thrive off of? Mainly carbohydrates, like the sugar, the simple carbohydrates, um, is how our body is fueled. If we then go and take that out of the diet, the body then has to work in a different way to gain energy. So, what the body wants or what it's looking for is that balance the whole time. If we weren't designed to have that system in the body, it just wouldn't be there. Our bodies are designed perfectly. It's only when we take them out of that perfect bubble is when we suffer. So it's the same with the mind. It's like if we take it off of its center, its balance, and we start going into what if, is this right, is this wrong? This is when we suffer in thought. It's
Mhm.
not in the moment, it's not in the moment of what we're actually doing, which we'll touch on later. It's the thoughts around that. And this is the same practice that we have within every system. If we take something out or start adding too much in, or, you know, worry about this and that, it takes us off that natural balance and that path. And this is why we're looking at a holistic package today, is that we're going to come into some of the ways in which we can practice balance and give those tools that are needed. So again, if we can have some notes or a journal throughout the day that we might use to notice triggers that happen, then that's when we can kind of see where our balance is coming off and where we can maybe put that back into alignment with small practices. And it's actually the same as what happened when we spoke about the food and the exercise last time. This is where we can really look at things and they kind of follow the same pattern.
And so on that topic, last time you mentioned three key points. So is that so the food, the exercise, and the mind? Those are our three elements that create all our balance. Are they equally important, would you say?
Well, when we talk about the food and the exercise, that's mainly like a physical aspect. So that would be like classed as kind of like body. And then we have the mind. So you know when you hear that the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, the body, mind, and self, or body, mind, spirit, or body, mind, soul. Many beings call it many different things, but it's ultimately um, the triangle, the
Mhm.
sacred triangle,
Yeah.
or the Trinity, the Holy Trinity of whatever you decide to call it. It's just a label. It's body, mind, and self is what I call it, but you may have different words to explain each one. There's a physical aspect, which we touched on quite a lot last time, of what we fuel our body with and how we kind of practice physical exercise to make our bodies feel better, to release those endorphins. And then today we're looking into the mind, which is the hidden aspect of health and well-being, because this is where a lot of suffering happens. And then when we look at what all of those are heavily linked to is the self, the being, the ultimate observer of all of this, what's happening. So we're playing out the play, and the observer of it all is the self, the oneness or the isness, creation, the magic, and all of it's connected. And we're here for experience. And we experience through the physical and the mental states, but we are ultimately perfection and divine. And no matter what you call it or label it, it is all the same across every religion. It's just usually a different
A name.
name or or thought of belief. We're going to go into beliefs and knowing later on, and I want to do a little bit of wordplay with that, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. So those are the three, the Holy Trinity, the three things that if they are in balance, then we have no pain or suffering or disease, discomfort.
Yeah, I was asking you just because as I hear things here and there, some people do say if the mind is set right, then everything else falls into place. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think your approach is that first we need to have, you call it our vessel, our body, clean and in balance itself physically to be able to not receive, but to be able to align then with more of the mind. Is there a little difference here, or is just people approaching it differently, would you say?
Yeah, so for sure, what again, it's an individual experience.
Yeah.
What we have come across with our teachings mainly is that because the physical is so tangible, like we spoke of before, it's you can see it,
Right, yeah.
you can feel it, you can feel the difference. It's like an actual it's a very physical aspect, and beings just love that. You see your body changing, you feel more energetic, you look more vibrant, your friends start saying, "Oh, you look good. What have you been?" All of these things are very tangible. The mind, when we talk of the mind, it's like no one else can see that or hear it. It's such an individual thing to you. So usually the usual thing that happens, I'm not saying all the time, but mostly beings want to lose a bit of weight or tone up or build some muscle or get fitter or stronger. There's many things that are desirable about the physical aspect of our being. So I'm not saying in every case, but the majority of cases, beings will see that as a base level of that. I want to be healthier, I want to be fitter, I'd like to feel this way. And this is just part of evolution. So when we take that into consideration, once we clear the vessel and we have more clarity of the mind, because it is like you get with heavily processed foods, we have brain fog and we can't see clearly and think clearly. So all of that lifts and it enables a shift to happen within our being to see then actually there's some things going on here in the mind that I'm ready to tackle now because I don't feel in discomfort or disease. I feel a lot healthier. I haven't got pains everywhere and aches everywhere. So it's just a kind of evolutionary part of your journey really that follows on from that.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Plus, I suppose it also gives a sense of empowerment because as you also um, start to eat better, let's say, you, I suppose, learn along the way and realize that maybe what you were doing wasn't really the best, and that empowerment feeling might be helpful as well as then the tangible feeling.
Yeah, for sure. The feeling that you gain from the eating is like freedom of physical aspects for sure. Yeah. Oh,
All
so
right.
cold here. Just
Well, I'm glad you got to get a jacket in the meantime. All right, so everything makes sense. So we were saying, so entering with relooking at the food and then having more mental clarity, then enable us to kind of move deeper into the
yeah.
how yeah of I guess the overall freedom. Let's say would that be
Yes.
accurate? And last time when we talked, you had mentioned that the freedom of the mind is where your specialty lies. So to start from the beginning, and I know you say it's a little bit of a secret, it's not really spoken. What is the mind? If you can explain in simple words, as well as what is freeing the mind in simple words to just start off simple.
Okay, so what we are looking at ultimately here is moving beyond the duality of likes and dislikes, more like labeling things as they arise. So it's like, that's right, that's wrong, and recognizing that every moment is a teacher. So sometimes I come to this quote that I often remember when I observe things like this is that Bruce Lee is um, one of the famous martial artists, and he used "be like water, my friend." Now, water it it stays the same, but you pour it into any cup or glass or bowl, and it goes into the shape of that,
Mhm.
and it's still the exact same thing as when you poured it in, but it molds to the shape, so it's able to shift and flow, and we're moving from reactivity to responding to life and seeing the perfection in what truly is. So ultimately, we're transcending our personal preferences. So, oh, I like this, I don't like this. But then we're finding the growth in everything that happens and unfolds. So, you being the observer, you would notice judgments and not identify with them. And then watching a preference, like I prefer this, I don't really like this, and it will arise. And then when you don't identify with that, it passes. So, what we ultimately need to remember is that we're remaining centered in a changing environment. So, our environment might change, but we always remain the same and we can adapt to anything without the preference of, I don't really like this. So, we see the divine orchestra in all experiences as they unfold. And then as we practice this, this will create that natural balance that we are and that our bodies are always working towards, is that natural balance. And as the resistance decreases, our peace increases. And then there's less energy spent in fighting what is the isness of the situation.
So,
Did you?
would you say, yes, I have to mention, I would say you're breaking up a little bit at times, so I hope we grab the most of it. Myself, I'm not sure if I grasped what is the mind.
Okay, so the mind or the thoughts are ever changing. So
Yeah.
our being, our self, so we have the body, the Trinity, the body, mind, and self or spirit. So we are always unchanging, the same. Our observations come from that aspect of the self. The mind will throw up past programs. So if you had something that happened when you were younger, as soon as the trigger comes, that you remember this aspect of your childhood, automatically you'll have a vision or a feeling or a certain smell that you remember, or all of these things get thrown up with that past memory of what happened. The fact is, if we run with that, if we take that and we build upon it, we suffer in that thought of, well, this used to cause me so much pain. I didn't like it. And the labels come in there. This is when we are in suffering because we're making a story and we're creating an energy pathway of teachings to help us grow from this situation. So if we're in suffering in the mind
Mm-hmm.
through past trauma, a trigger comes and we remember. We identify with that thought, we suffer in thought, not in the present moment, in the mind,
Yeah.
because we're identifying with something that's not actually happening, but it's here, a memory, a program, something that's caused us trauma, suffering. So the way and the tools to help us move past that is that we observe that this is happening. The thought has come. We don't want to try and run away from it, and we don't want to stand and fight it because that's fight or flight again. That's creating that instability within our being. Is that we observe it, we step back from that. We don't take it and run and try and do all these things and make up a whole new scenario in our mind. We accept that that's part of what happens in the mind. we don't attach to it. So we're not making up new things. We just bring our attention. So it's all about attention. Like you said before, wherever your attention is, the energy is. The energy will flow from that. So
Mm-hmm.
if we bring our attention to the present moment, so the mind's going off saying all of this things that are not even happening in the moment, but here we're sat here, our breath. Many beings do it in different ways. You can notice the breath, or you can even notice like the pen that's sat here. Just focus on it. The attention is drawn away from what's happening here. Look at the color, look how it feels. And whenever we're not paying attention to the mind that's trying to draw us into something to create suffering, then none of that none of that is relevant anymore. Like we spoke of the children, it's very easy to work with children because they're very much in the moment. They start crying for a reason, or they might hurt themselves, but if you bring their attention back, you say, oh, look at that beautiful butterfly over there, and they go, oh, where? And all of a sudden all the tears stop, and you say to them, why were you that upset just now? And they just won't remember because they're not in thought. They're very much in the moment. As they get older and we get more programs, it starts to become a lot harder. But if we can live in that space of observation and presence, that's where the freedom lies.
Okay, so I think you unpacked a lot just right there. I did wanted to, I do want to, it is part of the question, the conditioning and I guess the past experience, then you brought up the children. I suppose when we're a child, we're not really, let's say, in control for the sake of it, of what we're doing and what lessons of behavior we're learning. Those are being taught from the parents. So I guess the conditioning in those past repeated experiences is what brings us into those repetitive cycle or those triggers. Um, and you said the ways to break free from that is to, because they're only thought. We need to first realize that they're only in our head, right? And then to bring it back either to our breathing or to looking at an object that is right in front of us or either that we like. I remember another person in some previous video I watched, like flowers. If person like flowers, if they buy flowers,
Sure.
and, they would just look at flowers. And if they got just upset with somebody for whatever reason, good or bad, then they look at the flowers and like, and then it just dissipates, right?
Sure.
So that's the key here, because that was one question I wanted to ask you. In some practical ways, how can we recognize and break free from those conditioned patterns, especially for somebody that wants to try that, wants to try the journey? So I'm repeating myself a little, but it's really as we recognize that we're being annoyed or, yeah, annoyed, angry, upset, cranky, whatever, to just recognize and recenter and let it dissipate. Would that be the simplest way? Um,
It's all about attention. Yeah. So wherever whatever we're given attention is where all of the energy will be created. So, for example, the ego mind likes to control. Like you said, when we're growing up, when we're children, we don't have that much control over you know, what's happening. A lot of it's done by social conditioning, like guardians, whoever is looking after you and caring for you. So we get conditioned in a certain way that, it's not always going to serve us throughout our whole life. Is The fears that get injected to children, it comes from a space of love most of the time because you don't want them to injure or hurt themselves, but then it takes away experience. So we have to be careful in how we are judging certain situations and how, we want them to stay safe, but equally we want them to be able to be authentic and, actually experience life, because that's all that life is a whole experience. We don't just get born and then die. We experience, it's not just right and wrong, because the balance is in the middle. It's always about that experiential development and growth that we are here for, and it's like a multi-layered experience. Is that you have like a sensation will happen if we put it into an actual scenario. So the sensation will happen, like sound, for instance. A lot of beings struggle with this because they've changed the natural sounds or the songs into 440 hertz. So a lot of beings will have the hertz, which is 432. They've changed it slightly to make it. So the mental aspect is like, initially I've had a thought, I don't want to be here because this music is not nice for me to be around. That's the mental aspect, the judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So then an emotional attachment will come in and say, "Oh, I can't be around it. Get me away from this. I don't like it. It's not for me." So all of this time, the space of centeredness, the awareness, the balance is still there. It's here. It's right there. So we're here. Our mind is making a judgment,
Yeah.
but we are still unchanged. The inner
Okay.
being, yeah, so the inner being is here. Nothing's happening. There's just some music on. Yet the mind is saying, this is not good. I do not like this. It's wrong. It's not right for me. Therefore, suffering will arise. I get emotional content. I start to say, I don't want to be here. But then in that actual moment, there is an opportunity for you to grow and move beyond old patterns that always happen. So we're in Groundhog Day. This happens every time. So when the mind starts to create a story that leads to judgment and resistance, the suffering happens. What we can do is take a step back from that and look at how we can change our reality into gratitude. What would happen if I couldn't hear at all? What would I wish for?
Hearing.
Hearing. Sound. I would love to hear some music if I couldn't hear at all. I'm grateful for the fact that I can hear. It might not be your choice that the mind prefers this and not this, because everyone has a preference.
Yeah.
But your perception on anything is either your power or your prison. So we can either decide to carry on with the suffering and keep on with the mind games of, oh, I really don't like this, or we can use it as a power and say, I'm so grateful that I can actually hear this music. I feel really grateful that I have that presence, that I can be with that. But many beings fall into the trap of that suffering. And the trigger that it causes us is a doorway to our freedom. We shouldn't try to escape that, because if we do, that's just burying it even deeper. When we can become at balance with that environment, that's when we're free. Freedom doesn't lie in running away from it or fighting to the very end.
Wait, what you're saying, it just makes me think about different things, because I think the mind can be so powerful sometimes in individuals that, suffering is where they're comfortable because it's familiar.
Mhm. For sure.
They
For
are
sure.
some people that they do not even recognize their suffering, or they may be suffering in general, but that's just how it has always been. That's how he or she has always been. That's kind of like part of his personality, identity that they relate to, that people know them by, that, that's this person, that's what it is. And I do things like this, and maybe there's some, in a way, some misplaced proud about it. And I don't even know how to ask the question, because if you want to free your mind, you obviously want to work on yourself. But I do know, even part of my friends, there are some people, they are so stuck in this loop. And sometimes for me too, I mean, even if I try to work on those aspects, as I catch myself sometimes to be frustrated, and then even though I don't want to, I realize that it's just my perception of the situation, not the situation itself causing me to be that, but just how I react to the situation. And then I try to recenter myself, and then I see it dissipates. But those first 2 minutes are, oh, like, really, do I need to sit here right now? And then I do it anyway, and I see it passes, right? But then as I talk to other friends or family member, I see the very locked behaviors.
Mm.
How do you approach a person that is, identified by just the way they are? And if they were to even change a tiny bit, then people may not recognize who the person is, or they may not even recognize themselves, and they're better than that. And those qualities, if we can call them, it's what they make who they are. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm trying to paint the picture.
For sure, it's absolutely like spot on what you're saying, because all of the words, I've written down some words as you were speaking there, because all of those words that you described are of the person, the personality, the ego, rather than the self. So when we look at identity or ID of a person, this is your name and who you are, how you act. And like you said, changing that sometimes is quite a scary thing to step into, because all you've known all of your life is what my name is, what I do as a profession, how I look, how I dress, how I eat, and this is why sometimes beings find that they don't want to go on the eating journey, because this is always how I have eaten with my family, and they expect the expectations, which we'll come on to in a bit as well, is that this is who I am. I don't want to lose this identity because this is all I've got.
Yeah.
But is it? But is it? This is the person that you've made up in the mind. The mind knows this. The mind, it can predict what you're going to look like, how you're going to dress, how you're going to smell. It can predict all of this. You're very predictable. However, when we do things that are out of that, and this is when I say play the opposite game from the ego, because this is how we can change and manifest things that we want to achieve, rather than being in that set program of in that hamster wheel of going round and round in circles and never even getting anywhere, because we're just doing the same thing day in, day out, and we're not experiencing growth. We're just in that comfort zone. Now, when you said about reacting, it is an act. That's all it is. We are acting out a persona or a personality that we've built up over time, that keeps us knowing exactly what we eat, what friends we like to enjoy their company. It keeps us in a box of um, happiness where we can control that aspect. There's no real uncertainty there. Now, what I will say is that when you see others and you know that you could possibly help them, with any aspect of their life, it all comes down to their divine will. Everyone has a will to do something or not. And no matter how much you force, it will never happen for them. If they push back the same as you push, it's just going to come to this. And there's no amount of help that you can give anyone with a will to not see from your perspective or know what you know. It doesn't matter. They might live their whole life in a suffering bubble, but does that affect you? Not at all, unless you let it affect you.
Right.
So the only effect it has on you is that you feel like they should change because you know something perceived as better than them, but it might not be for their journey. Their journey is their journey, yours is yours. If someone comes to you with asking you for advice on your experience, then of course, this is exactly what I'm doing today, which is why I started today's podcast, as I am here solely to share my experience with you, not to force you into doing what I'm doing. This is how my journey is unfolding. And if you would like to take some pointers or some tools of what I use and put them into place with your experience, then that's absolutely great. But if none of it resonates, then you've got to do you ultimately. And that is your divine right of will that you have as a being.
Right. Yeah, I understand. It just sometimes can be seen as such a dilemma. And
But when we say dilemma, the only dilemma or issue that you have is within your being. That if you know you can help someone and they don't want help, you would only suffer trying.
right, yes, for sure. But if I know I want help, but I'm not 100% sure it's the help I need, mm, like I think it will come in one of the final question. I have a personal question to ask to you, but that would be towards the end. Maybe we'll loop back on that
Let's
aspect.
just kind of go with what you've just said. So you're not 100% sure. And the only way that we are able to know something is if we experience it. Because I can sit here all day to you and say, this is this, that's that, and this is how you do it, and that's how you don't do it. But you will never truly know unless you experience it for your own being, not through my experience. So the only way that if you're interested in something but you're not 100%, the only way you're going to truly know if you are going to be 100% with that is if you try it and if you do it for yourself. So if it was food, for instance, and you said to me, do you think that this food will heal something for me? And I'll say, through my experience, I have healed all of my ailments. But you have to go through that. You have to walk that to truly know if it's going to be healing for you.
Mm.
So with experience, we can go off belief in others, or we can go off of knowing. And I'm just going to write those two words a second because we're going to do a little bit of word play today and see how fun this can be. So when we believe someone, so I see someone on the internet and I believe in their message or their story that they're telling. Until you know, it can never be your truth. So if I believe something, it's always going to be a lie until I know. And the only way I'm going to know is doing it now, not in the mind, not in the future, not in the past. But the reason why we call the present is because it's our gift, it's our experience. And the only way we're going to do that is by knowing, by walking that truth. And it's written in every word that you will ever come across. The answer is in the word. When I form a belief from something that someone has said, even if it's my parents, oh, don't touch that, it's going to bite. Yes, that's logical to my logic part of my mind. So I won't do that. If they say to me, that's hot, don't touch that, I know what the outcome is because it's logical. But if I'm just believing something that someone says all the time and I'm not experiencing things for myself, I'll never learn to the fullest. So everyone's touched something hot and been like, oh, that's like a burn that you get. You know not to do that because you know the outcome. If you never had that experience, that interest, that inquisitive, that experiential desire is there for you. And that's what we can base our learning around is that, take the advice from others, but ultimately we have to do what our will, our divine will has in store for us. And others that want to be in that suffering loop, but feel comfortable in that, who am I to say you shouldn't be doing that? There's a better way when they're happy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it is really clear how you explained it. It's the person's will to do it, and it's by knowing from their own experience. I had some question about expectations and desired outcome, because I think it can be fairly typical to start on a new journey and being pumped up with some desired outcome that we may get out of it. Whether if it's the freedom of the mind, but if it's something more simple, or if I go to the gym twice a week, I am going to be perfect shape. There are those expectations, desired outcome, sometimes planning or list, and then trusting that I wanted to talk to you, because those are, I think, where there is a lot of struggle for people, whether it's in their relationship with others, professional life, or personal growth. How can you, because I think it's key too, and you may have mentioned it, but to wrap it all up, how can you release or detach yourself from the expected outcome? Because to me, if you stay attached to a specific outcome, you're most likely not going to get there. It's only when you detach yourself from it that it comes to you in a funny way. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
Can you wrap this
yeah, for
for,
sure.
for me?
Yeah, so when we have an expectation they come in forms of judgments also. We judge a situation or we create a judgment around that space. Um, life is, it unfolds in unexpected ways. So the practical ways that we can practice is it's like noticing physical aspects that come up, like attachment to outcomes. So, like you said, you have a goal that you would like to reach. A lot of beings, when they get to that goal or they've achieved that, they have a huge crash because they've put all of their expectation on this one event or this one, like a wedding or even if you're really good at sport and you have a sporting event or a specific day of the year, like Christmas, or anything that you have a huge expectation for. You may have experienced it, but we know from celebrities and whoever, once they've done that, they have a huge crash because they haven't taken part in the journey. It's been an autopilot response. Like you get somewhere and you just don't know how you got there. The mind was off somewhere else and you just were on autopilot, and the self was just making the same path as it always does. And if you pin a lot of hopes of joy on that aspect, and then it's joyous at the time, but then it's all finished with, and you go back to a kind of normal routine, you feel a lot of depression and what's the point? What next? And this is when we're taken out of that present moment again, because we're in that thought of everything should be as joyous as the last um, progress that we've made or something, because we're hanging all of our hopes on that. So the way to shift that is, as soon as these things happen and the expectation of an event or something that we feel should be a certain way, that as soon as our thoughts come to that, we've got to recognize that we don't want to be hung up in the mind, because this is where we live in a different world than the reality of the present moment. We want to enjoy the beauty of that. And the ego, it desires control. So it likes to know, it likes to expect, it likes to plan. And, but the best gifts come in that unexpected package, that surprise. So it's all about shifting our focus. So again, when that happens, and we're expecting something and we're making up a whole story, observe what's happening in the mind, shift that focus again, because wherever our attention is what we're giving energy to. So if we've expected someone to be here at a certain time and they're late, can we do anything?
No.
No. They're late. So our choice in this moment is two options or two avenues. We can suffer and say, oh, I hate it when people are late. They shouldn't be late. I would never do that. And create this whole scenario in the mind. Well, 10 other people, they're always late. Why are they always late? Or we can drop all of that suffering that happens with the attachment to the scenarios that we've made up that aren't actually happening. We're making them up, and just accept that that being is late for a reason, a divine reason, and know that everything is going to be okay. Because there's one question that we can ask ourselves in all of these moments, and this is a really powerful question. Now, I'm not going to ask you if you believe this. I'm going to ask you if you know that life is absolutely perfect for you every given moment. Is your answer yes or no? Do you know that everything that happens to you is for a divine perfect reason?
I cannot say that I know that for sure. I have heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to really believe it. As far as the knowing and being sure, not yet. And I can explain a little bit, I think, why
Mm-hmm.
is because I do, on a personal level, try to deconstruct my expectations and my ways of doing things. And instead of looking of things that did not happen for me, trying to actually looking at things that did happen for me.
Sure.
And more recently, and this is really fairly recent, let's say 2 weeks, as I started to look and putting my energy, right from the morning, I start my day with a meditation, embodying positive emotion, more like really embody them. And then looking then for clues that are guiding me towards a desired goal, but for which I have cut the expectation. Like I would like this, but if I'm not getting it, I guess that's okay. So if I'm making sense, I am starting to see that things do happen, and I found it in a very humoristic way, actually, that things do happen for me as I'm practicing that.
Mm.
But for the rest of my life, I cannot say that. Maybe one day I will see it. Maybe I was like, I wish I didn't spend like 30 some years to be like, why the hell did this happen to me? This is why. And just being laughing out loud, I guess. But hopefully it answer you. I cannot say I know. I think it's
Yeah.
possible,
Okay,
and
cool.
I'm starting to see it, but it's not yet fully embodied.
So that's so honest, and I'm so happy that you touched on that because this it's so incredible to watch and to listen to that answer because your journey is taking you to that very space. But like you said, you don't believe it yet. The belief is not what we need, it's the knowing.
Mm,
So when you know it, when you feel every aspect of that balance there, as you're practicing these day-to-day things that arise, as soon as the scales are tipped for you, you will find that. But the very word of you saying, I wish that I wouldn't have spent this amount of time, the journey always leads you to where you need to be at any given time. So this every moment that you have is specific for the energy that you're creating. You are the creator, you are in control. What's not happening at the moment is that you are not recognizing or realizing that that power is you. At the moment, you're having glimpses of that in this part of your journey because you see that by letting go of your control and your expectation that you've built up is enabling you to be free. So every time you resist, the friction happens and it brings another same experience to you that you're already disliking because you have it. And
mm,
then another one will happen because you dislike that one as well. But because you're starting to let go of these thoughts and these emotions that come with that, it's starting to become slightly more clearer for you to see. Same as the food. Okay, in the risings, you ditch the heavy breakfast and you have a juice, and it feels good because you got the energy and you feel lighter. Okay, I know that serves me, so I'm going to go forward with that and I'm going to take it to the next step. And this is what you're doing. You're taking steps towards your ultimate goal of achieving freedom of suffering. And this is all it takes is those small steps every day and observing what you know, not what you believe, will work for you in that experience. And as you go forward with this, things like the autopilot will start to change. And it won't be a suffering program anymore. It will be a joyous program that you feel absolutely in balance and in control without control. So you are in the driver's seat already, but you're really trying to, you know, get all of these things here and work them out and figure them out and take control. But more experiences are coming your way the more you hold on tight to that. So notice that you have the power, you're in the driving seat. All you need to do is let go. But when we say let go, the only thing that you can let go of is something that you've picked up.
Yeah.
So it's not your essence. So we're letting go of the ego mind, the control mind, the mind that the part of the mind that likes to build on thoughts that aren't actually true. So when we say about expectation, that's a whole scenario that the ego is made up. Yourself does not expect anything or anyone to do anything for you. It just is. Everything just is perfect and divine in that every moment. But
Well,
the fact that you're not there yet is because you're living in that ego mind that wants control, that wants to know the outcome, that wants to hold on tight because it loses identity, it loses power, and it loses everything that it's built up over this amount of time. And the only wish that you have is that you knew this, which you do know, from the age of, when we came onto this earth.